Well, and then you have on
Sorry, go ahead.
no,
Can you?
I was saying, and also on the Zoom, there's the record option as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did it through Zoom.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
It's recording in Zoom now.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Knut, for joining me today. So this is James Hansen, Libertarian, U.S. Senate candidate, and joining me is Knut, the Libertarian. Knut, tell me what again is your position in the state party here in Utah?
Full-on supporter. I don't wear a particular hat, but I always like to show up and help, whether it be audio, video, you name it. Soul support. I'm definitely down for it.
I'm surprised you don't have a role, because at the state convention you were pretty involved in helping to run the show.
Well, I've probably worn every hat that you can wear supporting a political party in the state. In Washington, I was the former state chair and had a lot of opportunities. We built a party in Washington to the point where we had an office space on a prominent road. There's an Aurora Boulevard, Aurora Avenue Aurora Avenue in Seattle. And we were able to get an office space and get a lot of candidates to run and get into the debates. So we had quite a lot of successes there that we were quite proud of. But I made a promise to my wife when we moved to Salt Lake that I would take some time off and not wear any hats. And she said, "That's fine. You go ahead and volunteer and stuff." But so
awesome.
So that's kind of what I do. I don't wear any official hat, but I'm hard to get rid of.
Very cool. Well, I've gotten to know you over the past few weeks through the state party, and Knut's a great guy. Some of you might already know him, but if you meet him throughout this year, he's a solid fellow. Anywho, Knut's with me today. We're gonna react or talk about some of the things on Evan McMullin's website. And the reason we're doing this is because yesterday the Democratic Party of Utah declined to put forward their own candidate, Kel Weston, for the ballot this fall. And that has left quite a few Utah Democrats chapped, because Evan McMullin is not a Democrat. We're going to look on some of his takes and stances, and he is very much a Republican and has some pretty authoritarian views when it comes to national security, healthcare, individual freedom of expression, and how you want to live your life. Definitely some things that a lot of Democrat voters in Utah are not going to want to support. It's basically like asking them if they want to elect, Mitt Romney for their candidate.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is it took a while to see Evan McMullin's full, his platform on his website. For the longest time, everything I saw on social media from Evan McMullin was, "Hey, support me. I'm not Mike Lee."
Yeah.
And so he had this big early push for everyone to start following him and supporting him because, hey, I'm not Mike Lee. So it's kind of like Rand Paul. He's got this guy who's like, "Hey, I'm not Rand Paul. Support me." And obviously, that's fine for some people, but I think having a principled candidate to support is a little bit more important. So let's maybe take a look at what his.
Otherwise, you don't know what you're voting for.
Yeah, you just know what you're voting against, and so.
If you go to Evan McMullin's website, evanmcmullin.com, you can see here on the screen, there's 3-page home priorities principles. And like Knut was referring to, it's quite vague in some areas, and there's a huge focus on working together, bridging the gap. I wanted to highlight here in this second paragraph here, over the past 5 years, it's become increasingly clear that the future of our nation urgently requires new politics, one that holds to principles but still finds common ground to solve problems. So when I read that statement, I just think, okay, so Evan McMullin, while we don't have a voting record on him, he's posturing himself as a Mitt Romney type senator. He volunteered on Mitt Romney's campaign back when he had his presidential bid. And then I think he volunteered again for him when he had his Senate bid in, well, maybe not in 2018, but he did work with Mitt Romney's presidential campaign back in, that would have been what, 2014, 15, going into 16.
Yep.
No, that's not right. Trump ran for president in 2016. It would have been 2012. Mitt Romney ran for president in 2012. Yeah. Anywho's, and that popped out to me. And then he says this, the Utah way, and this is a phrase we've heard from Governor Spencer Cox quite a bit, the Utah way, where we get things done and we get along. There's no fighting and bickering. Well, first off, Utah is definitely dominated politically by the GOP party. But the other parties, the Democratic Party has always polled a solid 30 to 35% of the vote in most statewide elections. And the Libertarian Party is, I believe over 40,000 registered Libertarians in the state of Utah and growing.
Yeah, and we're our candidates are getting anywhere from 5 up to 14% of the vote, and that continues to grow as the party continues to grow. So that's encouraging.
Yeah. But he says this Utah way, and he talks about productive ways forward, from immigration to healthy economic growth and anti-discrimination and religious freedom and such. And so when I read that, I was like, okay, so what is the GOP Utah way? Since the GOP dominates the state, what is the GOP Utah way? And I listed a couple of things. There was House Bill 415, which banned municipalities from creating oversight boards, like civilian oversight boards or committees that could give input to like the police departments and sheriff departments. So the Utah way is, preventing criminal justice reform and more accountability. I guess civilians are not to be trusted. Regulating the alcohol market. We have Utah, I think, is dead last in the nation for the freedom of an adult to just, go out and purchase the alcohol that you wish to consume.
Yeah, not only that, we force people to drive to multiple locations to pick up if they want to get wine or liquor. So if drinking and driving is something you're trying to curtail and cut down, it does not make sense to say, okay, you have to go to the grocery store, and if you want a bottle of wine with that dinner, we're going to make you drive to another location. So if someone's had anything to drink at all, we're forcing them to drive to another second busy, crowded location to get that bottle of wine.
And the hours aren't very good. Like, it closes pretty early in the evening. It's not open on Sundays. So anywho's, it's a pretty big infringement of the individual's ability to make their own decisions.
Well, and it's definitely not a free market solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember a few years ago, they had the referendum on medical cannabis, marijuana, and it passed the popular vote, and then the legislature came in and kind of struck that down and made big changes to it, to where it's heavily regulated. It's almost, I've talked to a few people who said, I would be interested in trying this, but the hoops that I have to jump through are just too much for me. And I think it's preventing people from access to a safe and a drug, a substance that has a growing record of usefulness in treating a lot of symptoms and ailments in the healthcare industry. And instead forcing them towards like things that are more easily obtained, like opiates, fentanyl, all the different
Right. Well, and the other thing to keep in mind is that the limited studies that are accepted, despite the fact that there are an enormous number of studies outside of America, a lot of the studies that are done in America, they are forced to use a particular strain from a particular university. And so anything that may develop as far as different strains being specialized to address certain things, whether it be seizures or anxiety or whatever, we're very limited in the process to even do research that would provide the information to solve a lot of these medical problems that people are addressing.
But hey, that's the Utah way, I guess. let the state, micromanage and control the individual. We're pretty good at waging culture wars against, LGBTQ and other minorities in Utah. Just recently, House Bill 11, it was vetoed by Governor Cox, and that veto was overridden. And, libertarians, correct me if I'm wrong, we strongly oppose the preferential treatment or the bias against any individual or group based on, sex, gender identity, religion, race, ethnicity. By nature of being a public institution, you have to serve anyone in the public.
That's correct.
So for me, when I see that makes a pretty strong case for why are we publicly funding, sports and athletics that should probably be privatized and paid for voluntarily by the users. Our school choice bill was vetoed by Governor Cox. School choice bill was put forward, which would have given parents what they called it backpack funding, where money was attached to the student and would have followed them to different venues. And there was some stipulations on it and some quality checks, whether it was private or homeschool. And Governor Cox vetoed that and said, not until teachers make at least $60,000 because of the high housing costs here in Heber. And I hate to break it to Governor Cox, but even if you're making $60,000, you can't buy a house pretty much anywhere in Utah. That's not enough for a mortgage on a house in Utah.
Yeah, and I often wonder how we can start making so many unique caveats on doing the right thing. It's like saying, well, yeah, we're gonna start allowing medicinal cannabis once people have decided that we can package them in the right kind of plastic container. It's like your freedom to choose a medication should not be contingent on other, regulatory factors. If school choice is a good idea, it isn't going to be a good idea because of the wage that public school teachers make.
Yeah.
Especially considering it's in the Republican platform. And if you think about it, to say we're going to have something in our platform, my suggestion to Governor Cox is that at the next Republican convention, that he bring all of his caveats so they can add those caveats into the Republican platform so that we're not inconsistent with principles.
Absolutely. Hey, I'm going to pause just for a second. The kid left the front door open and the dog sees somebody on the sidewalk and he's just going
sure pause.
Crazy. Sorry. Go downstairs. Let's see, bring that back on. Okay, sorry about that, Knut.
No worries.
I did send the kids down in the basement. I'm curious. I can hear them kind of yelling in the background. I'm curious if it's coming through on the audio at all.
Just a little bit, but hey, this is Utah. This is the Utah way.
We're real Americans with
families,
real families and real jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, it is interesting how you can take, like you said, you can take this idea that is a good thing to do and returns freedoms to the individual, creates a more free market setting, but we can't do that until, and for me, the housing crisis, not just in Utah, but across the nation, is make it easier for people to build their own homes, make it easier for people to get lending. The Frank Dodd Act And a lot of our county and city regulations make it so impossible, such a big burden to build shelter. And I realize you want, safe things being built, but the individual wants a safe home. They're not gonna throw up a shack that's gonna kill them. And we've got all this regulation in place, and it's definitely making the ability to get into a home or build your own home, and the types of homes that you can build. There's I'm kind of my first degree was in green building about more than a decade ago.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a hippie when it comes to earthship homes or cordwood homes or straw cob homes, straw bale homes, and passive solar. But a lot of those things, if you go to try to build a house like that, even though humans have been building houses like that for hundreds, thousands of years, it's not something that's readily doable under a lot of city and county codes in the building code. And to me, that's a big issue to solving the housing crisis.
Absolutely. If I might throw something else in here, there have been a lot of people who have had proposals for the homeless to build, and you may have heard of this process, but in Japan, they have tube hotels where people have a living space and a little storage area. And one of the things that a lot of people who are homeless are reluctant to use a shelter because they don't have a storage area for their stuff. And so one of the things that could be done as an example is to create a tube hotel type scenario for the homeless that would allow for a larger number of people to live in a certain area. And sure, that's going to develop problems with anywhere you have a situation. You're going to have people are concerned about crime. People are concerned about those things. But having a safe place where people can store their limited supplies, their life belongings, and have shower facilities, health care facilities, anything that they can do to that capacity would improve the situation and help anyone who can be rehabilitated to be moved into a much better situation.
Yeah. And there's lots of individuals who are wanting to do that work. And it's sad to see when government gets in the way of an individual or an organization coming and solving some of these problems proactively, without waiting for the government's permission.
So immigration, let's touch on that.
Yeah, immigration. Libertarians were pro-immigration. You're free to move and cross borders. The state shouldn't be infringing on that. There's quotas from the federal government on how many immigrants come in. And then, I can see people being anti-immigration. You want to kind of protect your way of life and your culture, and you don't want more people coming in. Well, stop creating immigrants. We have an immigrant crisis on the world stage right now. And it's because of the endless wars and regime change, the instability that we are seeding across the globe. People want to stay where people don't want to pull up stakes and leave their homeland. But when we come in and we dump weapons into an area and turn it into a nonstop civil war, people will leave. And so we need to stop creating these crises that are generating millions of refugees across the globe.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think if you add to that, if you look at what's happening south of our border, you have very ultra-violent drug cartels that are funded to the tune of billions of dollars through the Americans' war on our American drug war. And in that process, we are causing such social unrest because those cartels, they buy off the local and the state police, and then they do whatever they want. And there are very horrific activities that are happening south of our border because of the fact that they're able to make such massive income and profit due to our making drugs illegal. And so, which is not to be seen as an advocation for people to do whatever they choose and harm other people, but what you're doing in the privacy of your own home on your property with your property should be your own business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And man, what a failed policy, the war on drugs. You know, can we finally just realize, we look at the data, we look at the studies, making drugs illegal is not working. It makes it unsafe. It funds the cartels and crime. If we would legalize drugs, now I'm not saying that I think drugs are great and they're not dangerous. Clearly they have side effects. But this war on drugs is exacerbating and creating these other problems, where if we would just legalize drugs, then we could simply focus on the problems of addiction, but we wouldn't have the increased crime and violence that that surrounds these drug issues.
Right. There's growing information about how psilocybins and even some uses of cannabis are used to calm anxiety and for many people address depression and other things. So a lot of the solutions that would come through ending the drug war would have a serious impact on how a lot of people handle things that are disruptive to the American the fabric of the American society.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the number one prescribed drug is Xanax, you know, anti-anxiety pill. And so just imagine if with those studies coming out on the psilocybin, I'm not saying it right, but the mushrooms,
Yeah.
psychedelic mushrooms. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a redneck. I struggle with some words sometimes, but it's very promising. Microdosing that compound has shown huge effect and immediate effect on alleviating anxiety and depression symptoms.
Yes. Yes,
So
that's
it's very
correct.
promising, and we absolutely need to legalize that so those studies can go forward, so Americans can get access to this, you know, exciting new development.
Absolutely.
Um,
Economic growth.
yeah, economic growth. You know, Utah's doing well. I think in the 50 states, there's a lot of companies coming in here, but our state tax burden is, I was looking up on the Cato Institute today, our state tax burden is 6.2% higher than the rest of the nation, than the national average.
Right.
And that was one thing that surprised me when I moved here from Missouri to Utah. Property taxes here are, you know, 10 times, 10 to 30 times what my parents are paying. My property tax on this lot and house are like 30 times what my parents are paying for, you know, 80 acres in Missouri.
Wow, it's incredible.
So anywho's the property taxes here are like sky high.
Well, and don't forget the grocery tax. We're one of 17, 18 states in America that still have a grocery tax, despite having an $800 million budget surplus. And so, you know, with the inflation and the other costs that the public are seeing, it makes no sense for us to continue to have this grocery tax.
Yeah, and it's not huge. It's like 3.5%.
Sure.
Tax, but 3.5% adds up. You go and spend $100, $3.50 of that was taxed. You know, that's a gallon of milk, and people are like, "Oh, it's just a gallon of milk." But you know, if you don't have $100 in your bank account and you're, you know, counting pennies out of your tin can or out of the, you know, off the floor of your car so you can go buy a jug of milk for your kids, that's a big deal. And you know, why would we exacerbate the problem of food insecurity? You know?
Well, here's another thing. Just throw in this while we're on the subject of the grocery tax. The Republicans just recently, a few years ago, wanted to add a statewide, they were going to do a statewide tax increase on all across several programs. And one of them that they wanted to increase the tax was increase the tax on groceries. So that was another thing that they saw as just another source, a stream of income that they could use without a lot of consideration for the poor and middle class who are maybe not so fortunate as they are.
Yeah, no kidding. I was really disappointed this past legislative session when you know, they did that fraction of a percent tax cut across the board, and the Democratic caucus in our state legislature was pushing, hey, let's get rid of the state grocery tax instead. That would more directly help are poor and lower middle class, and that was, you know, pushed to the side and ignored. So missed opportunity there to reform our tax code
Yes.
in a way that directly helps, you know, the lower part of our social structure.
Yeah, and it was the Rosemary Lesser from Ogden and Judy Weeks from West Valley. Judy Weeks Roner, who were co-sponsoring. One's a Democrat, one's a Republican, who were co-sponsoring that legislation to eliminate the grocery tax. And obviously, you know, Governor Cox and the Utah way apparently was to talk about giving a credit for the lower income.
Get rid of the tax.
brackets.
Why do we need the damn credit? Just get rid of the tax.
Exactly, just get rid of it. I guess when you love accounting so much, you've got to keep something coming in.
Yeah. Okay. We'll collect the tax, and then we'll pay people to run a program to send some of that money back out to some people.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we'll just get rid of the tax. That'd be the most efficient, quick, effective way. And it doesn't expand government. Doing a grocery credit, that just expands the government need for infrastructure and what they're doing, where the simplest solution is just get rid of the grocery tax.
All right, Jimmy. So those are Utah things. But if you were senator in Washington, D.C., what kind of economic growth, what kind of impact on economic growth would you be able to have, or what would be your goals?
Yeah. One thing I'd be really excited about doing is removing federal regulation that is blocking growth in the healthcare industry. My brother is just finishing up his residency, and he's going to be working for a physicians group. They call themselves the Free Market Physicians. And for a low monthly subscription, they provide 24/7 access to your healthcare provider, your doctor. And they get their patients drugs at cost. They do a lot of stuff really cheap in-house. Things that they don't have the infrastructure for, they've negotiated with some larger local hospitals. But it lets people get quality healthcare at an affordable cost, much cheaper than what I was paying for when I was living down in San Juan County. When I was living in San Juan County, Utah, I was paying almost $1,000 a month for my health plan. And if I wanted to go see my doctor for anything, you know, boom, big extra charge on top of that. And people in this clinic, my brother's going to be working for, monthly subscription. I think the subscription is maybe $250 for an individual, or maybe it's a family. And you can go see the doctor when you need to, you know, and that's covered in your subscription. So improving access to primary care, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or a midwife or a nutritionist, getting some of the licensing out of the way, like that would let some of those, I don't need a doctor to go talk to him about a fever or my kid's weird rash. A nurse has probably had enough training to solve that issue. And so letting qualified people practice, getting some of the roadblocks to practice out, some of the laws that we have in place that protect big hospitals from competition, get those out of the way, let some free market healthcare solutions pop up. And that is going to be a boon to economic growth, because we have better health, we have more energy, we're saving money. And that's going to be a boon not only to the happiness and health of our citizens, but also our economic state. If we're a healthier people, we're going to have a better economic industry.
Well, that's an excellent point. We also have to consider the fact that we, with the population growth, and even there are multiple factors, that we have a shortage of doctors in a lot of areas. And so, as you say, opening access to nurses or physician assistants, people who have just as much or similar amount of training to handle the kind of things that you're talking about, would really help the communities in need of those kind of medical services. And another thing I'll just point out is a lot of people complain about, like, the cost of medication for those people who are on diabetes, and a lot of these medications have patent protections that make it so that they're able to charge exorbitant charges to sell that product. And so all they have to do when the time comes where they're about to lose their patent protection on that drug, they go and change one little aspect of one molecule, or the coding of the pill, or something ridiculous. And so they're able to sustain this exorbitant cost, whereas people should be able to make insulin in their kitchen. People
Yeah.
should be able to get a generic insulin. We shouldn't have people like Bernie Sanders, or there are libertarians in Texas that go down to Mexico and get drugs for diabetics, and they buy them at low cost in Mexico and then bring them across the border here. And that's because of the legislation that both Democrats and Republicans have put into place that protects big pharma. And so you're right. There's a lot of people like to say we need to regulate big business, but the problem is it's big business that's writing those regulations.
Yeah,
And so it puts us, so it puts the cart before the horse. It puts the horse into the cart and lets the horse decide where it's going to go. It's kind of crazy. So we definitely have to, and that alone, like reducing drug prices through ending these ridiculous patent protections that go on forever, would have a huge impact on the economy of people around us, who, especially those dealing with, insulin costs or things of that sort.
Absolutely. And the rallying cry over the past, President Biden said this in his State of the Union address, we're going to set the price of insulin at $35 a month or $30 a month. I forget exactly the dollar amount he said.
Yeah.
But no, that we don't need the government to come in and start setting prices, because that is not a free market system. That messes things up. What you need is to remove the protection that we've written into law for these drug companies, because it's actually true. NPR ran an article, earlier this year, it was last fall. Millions of Americans are crossing the border into Mexico out of those southern states down there, California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, to get cheaper drugs. My sister went down to Mexico to get a procedure that was a few $1,000s in Mexico, would have been $30,000 or $40,000 in America. And it's like, why does that doctor in Mexico get to do this same procedure for so much cheaper? And if you think about it, that we're creating this dangerous scenario. Why can't we provide quality, affordable healthcare options here in the States? Why are we making people travel into another country? That just adding risk factors. When they have to go into another country to get a procedure done, they have to recover there, come back. A surgeries, we have lots of surgeries, but surgery, you have risk of infection. Things can go wrong. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you could get that same surgery from a doctor in your town for the same price as in Mexico? And what we have to do is we need to get the regulation and the price fixing, the protectionism that we've encoded into our healthcare system. We need to strike that down so that it can be a truly free market system. And then we'll see those same low costs right here in America. They keep saying it's greed, and in a way it is greed, but it's greed of the political class and that upper elite who are pulling the strings of our healthcare industry. They're protecting their interests.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. That, greed exists in humans across the board. So why should we have a system that protects the monopoly of one particular group because they happen to be the ones that paid campaign donations to get the legislators elected?
Absolutely. So healthcare is a big issue for me, and I think that will boost our economic engine. Ending the war on drugs. I'm very opposed to our endless war state. And that's a huge financial drain on our nation. It's causing inflation as we continue to fund these wars over the past, in my lifetime, it's just been a nonstop state of war since I was in junior high. That's causing inflation, and, it's costing American lives, and it's costing lives around the globe. When we come into these states, Iraq, Saddam Hussein was a bad actor. He was a bad person. But our government coming in and overthrowing him on false intel has caused 10 to 15 times the amount of deaths that had ever happened under Saddam Hussein. Our sanctions, we put sanctions on countries. I just read an article in North Korea. There were 4,000 civilian deaths last year in North Korea, and a little over 3,000 of those were children deaths. And this was due to starvation and lack of nutrition. And that's directly linked to the sanctions that the US has championed on the world stage against the North Korean state. And, our foreign policy is not working. It's killing people. It's creating civil wars and instability. It's creating refugee crises. We have to stop being bad actors. We have to respect the sovereignty of other nations. We can't just come in and start pulling strings and attacking the sovereignty of a nation. We shouldn't be dumping weapons into nations. Just because we don't agree with the political leader of a nation, we need to work with him or him or her, open dialogue, free trade, and let that push them towards freer solutions. Freedom should be its own advocate. We shouldn't have to come in and advocate for freedom with bombs and bullets. And that's the current model. We pump money into an area, we destabilize it, we arm opposition groups, and at the end of the day, we are an engine of death and destruction. And that's an issue that is near and dear to my heart. It makes me sick the more I learn about the work that our CIA has done, that we know about. I don't see how you can look at the history of our nation over the past 100 years and still feel like you can trust what they're doing and feel like this is somehow going to magically start working. We have to choose peaceful actions if we want to promote peace on the world stage.
I like that. And I also want to sort of double back a little bit about how, libertarians were very supportive when Obama was ending the Cuban embargo. And that's one of the things that libertarians very much oppose. Now, certainly to say that the only reason that Cuba is struggling is because they have an embargo isn't the truth, but that certainly plays a factor in their drive to interact with other countries and interact with Americans. So it would, in some ways, if you think about it, if you were to end the embargo against Cuba and North Korea and some of these other countries that we're engaged in, we're ramping up our embargoes against Russia. A lot of the things, especially with Cuba, you can see how having the benefit of trade, bringing the economic strength to Cuba that they're currently struggling with, would most likely help to encourage the people of Cuba to stand against the constrictive measures that the Cuban government does when it comes to trade. And so it just goes to show that the embargo is one aspect of it, but how those countries govern themselves plays a huge role in the economy of those nations, as well as our interactive economy with them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at a country like China, as China has become more and more connected with the world, they've had to water down their control over their people, and it's still a very controlled state, and they're the most surveilled people in the world. And there's lots of human rights abuses going on there. There's the Uyghur genocide. But not talking to a state, not interacting with a state, that doesn't help solve those problems.
Right.
Opening borders, opening trade, opening dialogue, being genuine and honest in our friendship with other nations, that's going to lead towards peace. Not drawing hard lines, not getting into military pacts and treaties and putting weapons around the globe. And that only creates and increases geopolitical tension and leads to the conflicts and wars that, like what we're seeing today between Ukraine and Russia. Right.
And as you're experiencing in the other room there behind you. So, no, absolutely, man. And it's
3-year-old is he won't be infringed upon. He refuses to stay in the basement.
Hey, that's great. They're incorrigible. That's fantastic. Fiscal responsibility. Well, no, I don't jump ahead. Economic growth we talked about, but anti-discrimination. We're again going piece by piece here of Evan McMullin's page. And if I might add, and this is one of my concerns when I read through Evan McMullin's website here is that a lot of this, a lot of this seems fairly, with all respect, Evan, it seems like a lot of copy and paste from the rhetoric of a lot of Republican websites.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that Evan has going for him right now is that he has not been in office to the point where we can see how he would actually vote on these issues.
Kind
This
of
is
kept
just
his
sort of
mouth
taking,
closed. Yeah, he's been very, very closed. If you go to his Twitter, I was thinking about showing this out, but if you go to Evan McMullin's Twitter, oh, sorry, I'm on Twitter. Evan McMullin. Oh, gotta spell his name right.
there he is.
Okay. But his link here, it isn't the link to his campaign website. It's just a link to a donation page. You know,
Yeah,
we
very smart.
helped to elect Evan McMullin to the U.S. Senate, replacing Mike Lee. You know,
Yeah.
totally focused on just replacing Mike Lee, nothing about his stances and issues. And like you say, you go through his website and you read through these principles and priorities. You know, there's some stuff here that like I agree with and sounds good. And
Sure,
you know, he says reduce reckless government spending and inflation. That's what Mitt Romney has said. That's what Mike Lee has said. It hasn't happened. It's continued to rampantly balloon. And so, you know, Evan is a GOP man through and through. If you go to the Wikipedia page on Evan, I think you get better information about him because they document and cite statements he made in the 2016 campaign cycle. Here he opposes the use of torture while keeping the Guantanamo Bay detention camp open. You know, he worked for the CIA. We don't know what he did. That's still, that's not declassified.
Right.
But the CIA masterminded our torture program. Okay.
Right.
So many bad actors. And on the Syrian war, he talks about how he would support the civil war that's been ongoing there for over a decade.
Mhm.
He talked about the Iran deal here. The Iran deal, we've got to certainly, quote, we've got to certainly enforce the deal as it is, but I believe in strengthening sanctions on Iran to force them to make further concessions. Well, sanctions kill civilians. If you read about the sanctions on Iran, there's already been shown to have created scarcity in medicine and medical supplies and equipment, scarcities in food. Civilians are dying and suffering because of sanctions. So if you want to kill civilians and shut off all diplomatic solutions, hey, slap a bunch of sanctions on a country. You know, he worked for Mitt Romney's campaign when Mitt Romney was running for president. He's pro-life. He supported overturning Roe v. Wade in 2016 on the record. More recently, he's walked that back and says, hey, I think there's common ground and we just need to quit this tug of war. But, you know,
that's a nice thing to say when you're wanting the Democrats not to put someone up against you.
Exactly. It's like, okay, I'm trying to get the Democratic backing. Okay, I'm gonna switch this stance here. You know, I'm very pro-choice. Not that I support killing babies, but
Yeah.
when you ban abortion, abortion rates don't drop. There's been studies. Abortion rates do not go down when you ban abortion, but what happens is there are more deaths among, you know, pregnant women because they can't get access to an abortion. Abortions are often medically necessary. Okay. And the things that have been shown, and I've got some of this on my website with some linked research papers. So if people want to read more, they can go read about it. But the things that reduce abortion are increasing access to contraceptive, increasing access to primary care. So the more women can get access to a doctor easily and cheaply and access to contraceptives, then they won't have these unwanted pregnancies. And so, and that goes back to our discussion on healthcare. That's the type of healthcare environment we want to create. We want women to have access, the free access to the contraceptives that they want to use, free access to a midwife or a nurse or a doula or a doctor to talk about family planning and what resources are available to them. Those things are going to reduce abortion, not these authoritarian bans on abortion that we're seeing coming out of Texas and Florida and other states. You know, it's frightening because what's frightening is that those don't work and they harm women.
Absolutely. In addition to that, you also have to consider the social and economic issues that cause people to, so you're talking about the medical response, which is absolutely a huge factor in reducing the number of abortions that people have. But the social economic issues and even educational issues where we are not having a fortification of the kind of a stronger economy and a stronger social environment where people can have the kind of familial support, have a better, be better educated about the process. And so the getting to the point where pregnancy has occurred, we want to do everything we can to possibly educate people as well as bolster their economic status, so they aren't choosing to have an abortion because they don't think they can afford taking care of a child.
Yeah, absolutely. Increasing the economic situation of a person, increasing the access to education and quality housing, those things are going to reduce abortion rates. It'll make people feel more confident about bringing that child into the world, and we have free market solutions to that. You know, get the government out of the way that's reducing access to these things for women and families across the nation.
Yeah, our plan to reduce abortions is not through legislation, but it's a multifaceted plan by impacting the society, access to healthcare, stronger economic situation, better education. All of that will reduce, statistically it's been shown to reduce the number of abortions. So that's definitely our approach.
Absolutely. 1 second, Scraggy.
Yeah.
On same-sex marriage, while we're here on social issues, you know, in 2016, I believe in the traditional marriage between a man and a woman, but he respects the Supreme Court's decision. You know, libertarians strongly oppose the idea that the government or any individual should infringe on the type of relationship other consenting adults want to engage in.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
individuals, not the government, should determine the nature and terms of their relationship.
Absolutely. And so I find it funny that in 2016 he was trying to court, you know, Republicans, and now he's trying to cast himself as, you know, a more moderate, so that he can court the Democratic vote in the state of Utah. And it's like, listen, and I don't think a lot of the Democrats in Utah, they're not going to fall for this. They're very chapped and upset about what has happened, and hopefully, and I think they will, they're going to vote with their values and find that the Libertarian Party and me as the Libertarian candidate, we align on a lot of those key issues for them.
Well, and the very next line down on economic issues brings the whole thing to the clearest point you could possibly imagine. He supports NAFTA and these other trade agreements. The issue is that NAFTA, if it really were truly a free trade agreement, would be 1 page long. And it would say there is free trade amongst the North American countries. And the fact that NAFTA has so many, it's got a pharmaceutical codex, it has so many protections for corporate donors to the two-party system. It just goes to show Ross Perot was 100% right. There's a giant sucking sound coming from south of the border, and it's our economic strength being taken from the country and filtered in through processes to benefit big corporations, thanks to their special interest status in relation to the politicians. And now they and their children are becoming the next wave of politicians. So it's critical now more than ever to get in libertarians into office because of their stance on eliminating these corporate protections, eliminating the corporate welfare, so that we are in less need of personal welfare. We need to stop the process of enriching people just because they were born into a family that is close political ties with people in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, no, just to echo some of that, libertarians are not opposed to, you know, someone starting a business and making lots and lots of money. That's if that happens, hey, that's fair. You created a product that, you know, millions of people wanted. Good on you. But we should be, and lots of Americans are opposed to this idea that the government is here to protect those corporations and to subsidize those corporations and to bail out those corporations when they've taken on bad risk and bad debt. And why should we be on the tab for some company's bad decision? Let it fail. Whatever value there is, it'll get bought up. You know, Bush did lots of bailouts, Obama did lots of bailouts. And it's like, listen, if you would have let this industry and this industry fail, people would have come in, they would have bought up the valuable resources, and they would have just rebranded and brought the service back. But it would have gone through the market corrections and of debt and default. And instead, we inflated our money supply. We bailed out rich, mega rich individuals. To what end? You know, the market will always correct and keep things of value. And the government is, when the government subsidizes things, it doesn't let the market correct and cut out things that aren't valuable and keeps things away that are now just an economic burden to our state.
Right. Yeah. They're one of the slogans that they used was the banks and those big corporations were too big to fail. And so that's not true. They were actually too close to politicians to fail.
Yeah.
And so the same thing for big business, and the same thing goes for bureaucracy. There's a lot of bureaucracies that are protected by the state, and no matter how abysmal their service record is, they are protected and sustained year after year. In fact, they're even given obligate spending. You get $50 million in your budget this year. Hey, as long as you spend $50 million this year on whatever you think is appropriate, you're going to get $50 million next year.
Yeah. No,
we the taxpayers are, arguing over grocery tax, and
yeah, no, and that's another thing. The welfare state. I want to address the welfare state a little bit. We spend the most money per capita on our healthcare industry, and yet we have like the 20th outcome in the world. So we're not winning there. Our welfare state, the amount of aid we give to our citizens is not what it is in, say, Norwegian or Scandinavian countries. Mm-hmm. But before, I think it would be, me personally, before I would attack the welfare system, we have to end corporate welfare. We got to get rid of that first. Like, we can't be giving handouts, bailouts, subsidies to these big companies that are politically connected, while we're screaming that, hey, we've got to get rid of the welfare queens. And no, to me, that's a constant slogan from the GOP party.
Yeah, that's very Ron Paul of you. Ron Paul had a similar position of people have paid into this system their whole life, and to say, yeah, we're just going to shut down all these personal welfare programs that people have paid into for so long would be actually
immoral.
It'd be immoral, and it would be a default on the contract that those people had paying into the system. But that doesn't mean that we can't establish a stronger economy and move people away from needing those kinds of programs.
Absolutely.
And so
the roadblocks that the government has put in place that prevent the individual, because
yeah, I
think for the most part, people like to be self-sufficient. People like you have pride when you take care of yourself. And, I don't think there's millions and millions of Americans that just want to sit around and leech off the system. And like you said, if we improve the economic state and the healthcare state of our nation, those burdens on the welfare system are going to decrease.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also been brought up how if you take the amount of money that the American Defense Department, the military industrial complex, and how much money we spend on defense, and how it rivals what I think is 18 other the top nations combined. Yeah. If you think about eliminating that, downsizing that, cutting through all the fat, the obligate spending, the redundancy, there's so many parts of that could be cleaned up. Addition to ending handouts for special interests, we could get to the point where we could actually eliminate the federal income tax. If we got rid of all of the waste, if we cleaned up the fat out of Washington, D.C., we could eliminate the income tax. That one act alone, that one success alone, which would be a very libertarian one, would provide the automatic increase of 20 to 30% of the economic strength of our communities, which is enormous.
You think about what a boon that would be to local small businesses in your community. You have that money in your pocket. You're able to support local efforts, local schools, local initiatives, local businesses. That would be amazing to see that kind of change.
That's why we need a libertarian senator like Jimmy.
Yeah. Since we got on the topic of taxes a little bit, our nation is a staggering amount of debt, like around 30 trillion now. I don't know if we've actually passed that threshold or we're about to, but cutting taxes without cutting spending is immoral. And that's what we've seen. Donald Trump came in and did a big tax cut, but then increased spending. And, Biden claimed to decrease deficit spending, but I'm like, against like what metric? Like the fact that the year before the deficit spending was like ballooned by like trillions of dollars through these COVID bills. You've cut deficit spending, like, because we're not passing $1 trillion COVID bills anymore. So we absolutely need a balanced budget. So I would support a balanced budget amendment. And like you said cut the fat. There's so much waste, there's so much cronyism throughout government and throughout these corporations that we protect through legislation, and we have to get rid of that. And we have to make healthcare cheaper, and we have to make it easier to build a home and be economically successful. And as we do that, as government spending goes down, then we can start, like you said, we can start cutting taxes and eliminating like the federal income tax. And that way, your paycheck is your paycheck. You own the things that you produce, the work that you do, 100% of it goes to you. It's not dug out of by the government.
Yeah, Democrats are perpetually fighting to raise the minimum wage. Libertarians are perpetually fighting to eliminate people reaching into your paycheck and taking your hard-earned cash. The U.S. national debt, I just looked it up, is $30.4 trillion.
Okay, so we've passed that $30 trillion mark.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school and it was like 4 or 5 trillion. And we've heard these fiscal hawks, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Mitt Romney, and none of them have achieved that goal. And they all continue. They talk about cutting spending until they have the majority in Congress, and then suddenly, hey, now we're passing our spending bill. And then the Democrats have power and they pass their big spending bill, and sometimes they work together to pass really big spending bills. And it's like, come on, like this is just idle by talk. Like nothing serious is being done about this issue. And I would say Mike Lee, being there in the Senate for 12 years, he's failed on that promise. He ran on the promise of term limits and just serving 2 terms in the Senate. And I'm excited to be elected Libertarian senator for Utah, to go into Washington, D.C. and work with anyone who's willing to achieve these goals. I don't give a flip what political party they're from. If they're willing to work on these issues, this issue or that issue, I'll work with them to make these things a reality. And, if they want to pass a giant expansion of government power, I'm going to vote no for that. But if there's another thing we want to work together on, I'll work together with them on that thing. So much of Washington is these culture wars and of no substance, no political substance, no real ideas, just rhetoric and like one-line sayings where they're just attacking back and forth with each other. And it's like, listen, drop the charade. You guys have held the reins of government, and look at the mess you've put us in. We need common sense in Washington, D.C. We need regular, logical, level-headed Americans. And I feel like I'm that option. I'm a public school teacher, physicist, degree in physics, and minor in Chinese. I really am interested in doing some foreign policy stuff with China and trying to, develop ties, some friendships and free trade with China versus like the trade war disaster we saw under Donald Trump's presidency, where we had to give farmers over $20 billion in bailouts to farmers to cut their losses because China wouldn't buy our soybeans anymore. You know, that big government. The other day we see the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, his embargo at the border cost us, you know, billions of dollars,
Right.
and exacerbated inflation and shortages right now. These people only care about increasing their power. They don't actually care about getting logical, data-proven things done. And with my background in science and academia, you know, I'm willing to come in and look at what works and push those free market solutions with whoever wants to jump on board. And you know, some people are pretty caustic, like Ted. I'll use the example of Ted Cruz. There was the Lindsey Graham said if somebody shot Ted Cruz, you know, they wouldn't report you or whatever, because, you know, basically that he's just kind of an ass to work with. And I promise not to be an ass in Washington, D.C. You know, I'll get along and reach out and work with who I can work with to build a coalition to achieve these goals. And then I'm excited for the liberty movement across the nation. You know, we don't have a libertarian senator. We've never had a libertarian senator. We briefly had Justin Amish as a libertarian representative, but it was close. Ricky Dale Harrington Jr. almost won the Senate race against Tom Cotton in Arkansas. And so the America is hungry for the fix to these problems. And the libertarian movement is rapidly expanding. And that's exciting to me. I'm so excited to see, you know, they say, well, when you get to Washington, D.C., who are you going to caucus with? Well, hopefully, hey, there'll be a handful of other libertarians to be caucusing with.
Yeah. Well, and to add another point to this is that, you know, hearing from Justin Amash and other representatives, and I would also point, if people are thinking, oh, what kind of vote record, like all of the things that we do in the conversation prior to an election, a lot of people are just going to dismiss as rhetoric.
Yeah.
But if you look at the vote record of people who the media describe as libertarians, okay, Justin Amash, Ron Paul, their vote, you know, Thomas Massey, you look at their vote record and it aligns with libertarian policy 99%. And so getting an actual libertarian isn't going to be an unknown entity.
Yeah.
It is you're more likely to have a team of people who are going to continue in that voting record, in the spirit of voting record of Ron Paul, of Justin Amash, of those people. And that is where we are aiming to plant our flag in that position. So we're not there to just be a third way of being a corporate favoring entity. We're not there to be a third way to tell you how to manage your life or who or what you can put into your body. We are there to take any of the burdens that come from the federal government, thinking it knows how to run your budget, run your society, run your community better than you. And that's what our goal is to extract all of those things from the Washington, D.C. equation and give you your paycheck back as a thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Justin Amash, you know, the President Biden came into this presidency with the promise of criminal justice reform, you know, with some of the abuses we've seen and continued to see of minorities. And Justin Amash co-sponsored a bill to end qualified immunity with Presley, I forget her full name, but you know, a Democratic representative from like Michigan or the East Coast. And you know, wow, what a simple but major step to protect the individual from police abuse. And it went nowhere. No one is interested in solving these problems. And I have no vendetta against police officers and sheriffs. And, you know, I have several that live on my block, but I do have a strong opposition to police abuse of the individual. And last week in the news, we saw that man who was pulled over without license plates and then chased and then executed essentially on the ground.
Yes.
Awful. Patrick Leola, I believe was his name.
Mhm.
And just because, why are we willing to kill people for a non-violent offense? Like, we need to get victimless crimes off the books. And B, we need to end qualified immunity. You do not have the right to grossly abuse people's civil rights just because they're running from you or resisting arrest. And law enforcement needs better training and needs to be held accountable. And that would be a simple way to get some major criminal justice reform done.
Absolutely. Should we go back to Evan's page, or is there any more on the Wikipedia page you want to look at?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, just if people want to come look at this, there's just some great stuff here about actual statements that he's made in his 2016 campaign. And it's all
Right.
sourced down at the bottom to newspaper articles and such. So
Oh yeah.
a lot of people trash Wikipedia, but I'm like, hey, it's a great source to start at to learn things, because everything is cited down here. You can click on the links and go read the primary documents.
Right.
Big fan. You can, people are like, well, anyone can go in and change it. And I was like, well, it's not quite that simple.
Yeah, anyone can go in and change it, but then it becomes disputed and it does not stand.
It has to be peer reviewed.
Yeah, exactly. And cited.
Anywho's, going back to Evan's page here. Yeah. Right here, this one I thought was interesting. Stand up to extremists. And he kind of makes some references to the extremists he fought against in the Middle East while he was serving in the CIA. And what is an extremist? Like a Republican or a Democrat is going to define an extremist differently.
Yes.
Typically here in the States, we've heard a lot about, parents have been maligned as extremists or domestic terrorists. And to me, an extremist is someone who is willing to commit acts of aggression against others. That's an extremist. So if that's your definition of extremist, then sure, I'm opposed to extremists. But if an extremist is someone who just has a different worldview than me and, but wants to live peacefully and do their own thing, that's not an extremist. And so the vagueness of this statement and some of the things he talks about here kind of make me a little alarm bells going off, a little leery about okay, so who are we giving the government the power to define what an extremist is? How are we quantifying that? And I think it just opens up a Pandora's box of issues.
Right. Well, and it also sustains the idea of standing up to extremists is part of the argument that is used to maintain the surveillance state.
Yeah.
And to use the almighty power of the federal government to eavesdrop on conversations for everyday citizens. And if you, as you say, if you ask Democrats and Republicans, they're going to say differently. Like the Republicans are going to probably say that Antifa are extremist terrorists, and Democrats are going to say MAGA, alt-right Republicans are extremists. And of course, yes, there are many who are becoming extremists, but a lot of that is just a metastasization of is just the cancer of corruption in America that's metastasized into this really deplorable state. But yeah, these are arguments that are used to sustain the CIA and their surveillance state, which is not something that libertarians support at all. We're pardon Snowden, pardon Assange, end these abuses of power, because there shouldn't have that kind of ability to eavesdrop into your personal life.
Yeah, we've talked about this, and we we had broached this topic of the violence that we see in America, particularly gun violence. And we have a violent government, a government that at the end of the day, they employ violence against their citizens. We employ violence against other nations. And it's been this way for decades and decades, this violent model of government. If you do not comply, we're going to throw you in jail. We're going to starve you. We're going to kill you. Think Ruby Ridge or that Waco compound.
Yeah, Waco. Yeah.
Awful things. And then we wonder why our society is becoming more violent. Why are we seeing this increase of fighting and vitriol and actual violent assault of individuals against other individuals? And I feel like our government is breeding that culture. When we have a government that seeks to control and micromanage the individual, you naturally get this type of violence. And that, to me, is what extremism is. Extremism is when you are using force or threats of force against another to take away their natural rights.
Right.
And so I think if we change our style of government, we'll naturally see a decrease in the violence and some of the vitriol and hate that we have in our nation, because we're not trying to control everyone around us, and no one's trying to control us. And so we're not in this constant state of defense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, healthcare costs. I think you've kind of covered that.
We've talked on healthcare. We've talked about reduced reckless government spending and inflation. Listen, he's going to be another Mitt Romney, GOP senator, and they've done nothing to reduce government spending and inflation. It's not happening. We need someone who goes in and staunchly stands for an audit of the Fed. And if the Fed won't be audited, it needs to be ended. And when we audit the Fed, I think we're going to learn some pretty awful stuff. And we'll probably just end the Fed after we audit it. But how can we have this body that controls our monetary supply and just is magically able to fund anything the government wants to do, and we don't get to have any insight into how it's operating?
But it's got the word federal in the title.
Yeah, it's there for our best interest. Shut up. Anywho's, Ron Paul has a book, End the Fed, and just lays out reason after reason after reason. And what's been funny to me, the late senator of Nevada, he was a boxer. Oh, what was his name? Orrin Hatch just passed away. Him and Orrin Hatch were good friends. When Mitt Romney ran for president, he got up on the Senate floor and said, "I have it on good authority that Mitt Romney hasn't paid taxes in 10 years.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And his name is slipping me. I can't think of his name, but he's the late senator from Nevada.
Yeah.
Harry Reid.
Okay.
He ran on the campaign promise to audit the Fed. That was, as a Democratic senator, we will audit the Fed. You can go on YouTube and watch videos of him at debates talking about auditing the Fed. And then it didn't happen. And it's like, come on, he was in a position of power. Why didn't it happen? And we absolutely have to build a coalition and demand transparency for this government body. They shouldn't be able to magically operate. And that goes for the CIA and the FBI. Why do these government bodies and agencies get to operate under the shroud of secrecy? What are they trying to hide from the American people?
Yes, exactly.
And I think a lot of it's, what are they trying to hide from other nations? But if we're not constantly trying to assault the sovereignty of other nations, then we won't have anything to hide.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. You go back to the Evan McMullin thing you're on. It says our national debt has tripled since 2010 and is now approaching 30 trillion. My recommendation, I just sent you a text with a screenshot of the US debt clock showing it at 30.4. So I think you should take a screenshot of this page, a screenshot of the national debt clock, and send Evan McMullin and Mike Lee tag them both and say, hey, Evan, you need to update your website. We have now exceeded 30 trillion in debt.
And Mike Lee, what the hell? You've been there for 12 years.
Yeah, what do you have to say for yourself? So that actually, I think that would be a good social media post for the kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Protecting air and water, I think this falls right under the non-aggression principle. If you are polluting water, air, and soil, if you are damaging ecosystems, threatening other species with extinction, which we're seeing rising rates of extinction, it's an alarm bells are going off among, environmentalists right now, that we're possibly entering this widespread extinction that's really going to hurt our ecosystem. If you're doing those things, that's an act of aggression against others. And you should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And we have lots of laws on the books to protect our soil, air, and water and our ecosystems. But what we see is that Democrats and Republicans are constantly giving waivers to, exemptions to, pay a fine, we'll kick the can down the road. And it's all in the name of protecting special interests. You and me, regular everyday Americans, are rarely major polluters,
Right.
The polluters are the government. The military industrial complex is the #1 polluter in the world. And so we need some accountability there. And then sometimes their solutions to these are just like off the walls wacko. I was watching a documentary on carbon capture with some of my students a few months ago, and this was a setup in Switzerland, and for like $50 million they had built this carbon capture device that captured the carbon emissions of roughly like 100 to 200 cars, what 100 to 200 cars would emit in 1 year. And I was like, dude, for 50 million bucks you could get thousands of people to quit driving cars. How are we spending our money? And it's just insane, some of the things we do. I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, and I like how you kind of put that out, because it goes to my theme of protecting the environment that goes back to just the core libertarian value of property rights. You've got your kids running around in the background there, which is brilliant. And the quote I'll give has just been the longest standing position of the libertarians about the protecting people and the environment, because kids breathe in that dirty air. The society really is impacted by those things. So my favorite quote on that is that no state, industry, or corporation has the right to pollute the air, the lungs of the children downwind, nor the soil or water of the farmer downstream.
Yeah.
And that's wholly based on the libertarian principle of protecting people's property and being violated by others. And so we can't sit by and continue to give exemptions to our pet projects because they are our pet projects, because we're allowing people to pay for their exemptions and even to buy extra exemptions from their neighboring corporations. And it's just, if you want to pass a beautiful earth down to future generations, it's not going to come through this complete aberration of our responsibility.
Yeah. Building off of this and touching on energy, we subsidize a lot of different energies, but one thing we have basically shut down in America is nuclear power. And other nations like Canada, Germany, France, like France, I believe, is 70% nuclear power. And we have the resources, we have the technology, we have the science. We absolutely should be using a source like that to create instant, dependable, clean electricity. And instead, we've regulated it and held it down where it's not allowed to compete on the free market. And we're still using, coal and natural gas. And now again, it's a free market. People can get their energy supplies where they want to get them from, but the government should not be picking winners and choosers. We need to remove all public money from the energy sector.
Yeah, exactly.
right here, he talks about improving Western forest management. The spike of, massive mega wildfires that we've seen over the past few years, that goes with the drought conditions and increasing temperatures, which would, exacerbates the amount of fuel there is for those fires. But the US is more forested than it's been in the past 100 years. We've absolutely stopped the management and logging of some areas, and so we're getting these mega fuel wildfires. And normally, before we had all our cities and all these people here, those big mega wildfires could burn, and
Yeah.
it kept itself in balance. Our forest policy has only created more dense forests, and we've got to figure out how to manage those forests better on a free market solution. There's I'll talk on house costs here too. One of the major things driving up house costs is the cost of lumber. I just built this house that we're in 2018, and the lumber prices then compared to the lumber prices now are 4 to 5, 6 times higher for certain lumber goods.
Yeah.
And I was talking to people who were building their houses right about halfway through the pandemic in like mid to late 2020. And their contractors were coming back and saying, hey, I'm going to have to rebid your lumber package. We're going to need like an extra 30, 40, 50, $60,000 to cover the increase in these lumber products.
Oh, wow.
And, we need to manage our forests better so we don't have these mega wildfire events. And that could help with our lumber market and
Right.
help drive down costs and make it more affordable for new homes to be built.
Well, and to throw back to something else we talked about earlier, there are a lot of industrial applications that hemp has, which again, when we have states confiscating people's truckloads of hemp, people are not likely to invest in a hemp farm and produce the kind of have the kind of technological advances that this plant has to offer if they're afraid of their crop being confiscated and not returned to them after years of investment and farming growth. It isn't easy to be a farmer, by the way.
Yeah,
it is a difficult process. I've got farmers in my family. My dad came from a farm in Virginia. My father-in-law and brother-in-law are currently managing a farm over in Duchesne, and I go out there and work. We build fences and I know what it's like to get out there, and it's not easy to run the crops and to harvest. These things take a lot of focus, energy, time, and financial investment. And if you're thinking, I'm going to grow, 30 acres of hemp, and then only to discover that, these things are they're just waiting for you to truck that hemp out of your property so they can pull it over and confiscate it. Why would you go through the trouble, and why would you innovate an environmentally friendly, pesticide-free option when the state is about to constrict you because they're protecting the people from the paper mills or the oil industry who've donated to their coffers?
Yeah, absolutely. And to what end is the hemp market being suppressed? It's just to protect special interests, where that product could revolutionize a lot of our pulp product materials, paper, wood, and be super sustainable and recyclable. I jumped to my Facebook Senate page, James Hansen for U.S. Senate. I wrote a little article about this act in the Farm Bill, but basically it's the FSMA Act. I forget exactly what it all stood for, but it's just a set of regulation. And one of the articles I've linked here breaks down the cost to small farms versus large farms. And this is disproportionately hard on smaller farms. And it's going to reduce access of local communities getting local healthy produce from local farmers. There's so many things in our agricultural system that are set up to protect large corporate farms. And
absolutely,
the Prime Act that Thomas Massey has been pushing is one example that would make it easier for direct market farming and would help people get organic, clean, healthy food, and it would help the bottom line of small farmers, and it would help the bottom line of families.
And so how do people find this your Facebook page?
Oh, well, if they go to my website, jimmyforutah.com, there's a link for it. But if they I imagine if they just went on Facebook and typed in James Hansen for U.S. Senate,
Okay.
pop up. We got to try to get this to, we're at 158 followers right now. A lot of those, I think, are my extended family. So we need to boost my reach to more of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's the goal.
Let's see, keep America safe. This is basically, giving the CIA more power, expanding our military might, so countering violent extremism. None of that, and all of that has been done in the name of safety, in the name of spreading democracy, and it's just failed. We've got 20 solid years of failure, and we can go back further than that. It just doesn't work. We've got to choose peace. We've got to choose accountability. We have to choose individual rights and liberties, and that the government does not have the right to come in and invade a sovereign nation, influence a sovereign nation. It does not have the right to spy on its own people. And so, Evan, if you want more of the surveillance state and more of the military industrial complex and the policing the globe, Evan McMullin's your candidate. And I think a lot of Utahns do not, they want to go the other direction. We want more freedom. We want more sanity. We want peaceful global solutions, not solutions that are instigating more disruption and conflict.
Exactly, precisely.
And so that's his principles, and he ends it up here, chip in, donate to me today. By the way, he talks a lot about, being a grassroots campaign. This guy is hauling in hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you go on the FEC and look at their reports, him and Mike Lee combined are running multi-million dollar. It'll be a multi-million dollar election cycle for these two guys. And so if you are alarmed by the money in politics and the special interests protection that brings with it, hey, look at jimmyforutah.com. I'm not a big money candidate.
Yeah, that's not your goal.
I'm not turning away donations. We do want to be able to do some things in the state and go around, and that costs money, and it costs money to have people work on the campaign. And so people absolutely can donate to the campaign on my website. They can donate to the Libertarian Party for Utah, the state party for Utah, which is assisting in my campaign. But again, I'm not here to enrich myself. And that's another thing that makes me sick, is you see, all the money in politics, and people come in to office and they just, suddenly their net worth just massively multiplies in balloons. And it's like, give me a break. Like, I'm a regular American. I have a 9-to-5 job, so to speak. I'm not an investment banker. That's another thing. If you Google Evan McMullin, the first thing that pulls up, American investment banker. So he went from the CIA. We don't know what he did in the CIA exactly. It's classified and he doesn't talk about it, to American investment banker for Goldman Sachs. And then the GOP picked him up as a financial and security, like foreign policy advisor, when he was working for Mitt Romney, and he's just been doing politics since that. So,
right.
There's a lot of money to be had when you're whining and dining in those upper echelons of government power, and that's the problem with our country. So Evan McMullin would absolutely be a step backwards for Utahns. It would not be a step forward.
I hear it, man. And now let's go to your website.
Okay, so let's jump here. Jimmy, and you can go for Utah, or you can type in the numeral for now. I added the other domain, so it'll go either way, spell it out or type in the numeral 4. Jimmy Hansen for U.S. Senate, Libertarian candidate for Utah. I've got my homepage here. A little bit about my background. Here's a letter that I drafted about a month ago. And I just talked about, again, my background. I grew up on a small farm in Missouri, moved out here, and have just stayed in the state. Really, really like living here in Utah. And then I talk about some of these same issues that we've been discussing and why I think they're important and how I think we can address some of them. If you go to my issues and solutions page, again, I've got some pretty detailed information. I've cited source materials when I'm making claims about, what works and what doesn't work. And I'm going to continue to add to this. Again, I am, I'm a public school teacher. I'm pretty busy. It's last 5 weeks of school. I coach at the school, tennis and cross country. So I'm pretty involved. And, I've got 4 kids to boot. But as I'm able to spend some time on this page, I continue to add material. And hey, in 5 weeks, my goal is just to blitz the state. I want to be all over the state of Utah, June, July, and August, and meet people, talk to people about these ideas and how we can improve the state of government for our nation, and build a coalition of voters all across the political spectrum that are seeking to tackle these big issues, because Washington has not tackled these issues. They continue to exacerbate, make these issues worse, and kick the political football, so to speak, down the road.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they'll come into power, you'll have the Republicans or the Democrats in power, and they don't solve the problems. And enough is enough. We need regular, cool-headed, logical Americans to come in and represent the people and push back against government abuse, government overreach, government waste, and make America truly the land of the free, because we absolutely are not. We have the highest incarcerated population per capita. Our market is not the freest market in the world. The Scandinavian countries, they have much freer markets than our markets. Our markets are much more regulated than, say, Denmark or Finland. They do have a welfare state, but there's a difference between a free market and then, a tax and a welfare state. I've been reading Hayek's Road to Serfdom recently, and that's a distinction he makes in there. That, anyways, I guess the point I'm getting at is, we're not the freest market in the world. We're not the freest people in the world, and we need to fix that. We need to return the power to more localized government. We need to turn the power to the individual, and we need to protect Americans from, we're heading for a disaster. Like, are we just going to have an economic crash if we continue on the path we're currently on? We're having increased violence, increased political violence. We're rapid inflation. Like, we are just digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole. And, it's not a pretty scenario. If this all comes tumbling and crashing down, there's probably some anarchists out there who would gladly want that to happen, but it will not be good. We don't need that type of unrest and destabilization of our state. And that's what the federal government is headed towards. And so we need more common sense, and we need it fast. Like, we need to fix these problems, and we can fix these problems, and we can do it without violating the rights of the individual.
Yeah, in fact, the goal is to do it to restore a lot of the rights and that personal and economic strength to the individual.
Yeah.
I saw the other day someone had quoted, I'm trying to find the statistics on this because I always like to back up anything that I share, but someone was saying that the American bureaucracy, the bureaucracy that is the American government, is larger, and we're supposed to be like this, constitution-based federal republic, but our bureaucracy is larger than that of communist China. And so I'm trying to find the exact numbers on it, but it's interesting if that turns out to be entirely true, which if you think about our military spending, everything from the NEA to NATO to all of the different things that the federal government's involved in, World Trade Organization, et cetera. We participate in a lot of things, and we also have many bureaucratic systems from the political industrial complex, the military industrial complex. And so if you look at how massive and expensive it is to run that bureaucracy, considering that we've also added to it that obligate spending I was talking about, that just sounds outrageous. And so a lot of these countries, the Scandinavian countries, these as in America, we call them social democracies, but you're right, they are more market-based, and they actually have smaller bureaucracies, even though they do have social programs.
Yeah.
And so it isn't that libertarians are all anarchists and trying to just destroy the government, but at the very least, we need to chip away at the calcifications of this enormous bureaucratic system. I call it the shielded bureaucracy, because it's protected against any kind of correction.
Absolutely. That was a great and eloquent way of putting it. Yeah. While you were talking, I was like, are you kidding me? We have more bureaucracy than China. Isn't that why China is bad, US good? Like, isn't that why we're
right.
Amping up the military tension between us and them? It's because the bureaucracy of communism is a threat to the world.
Right.
And so it's just so hypocritical.
Yeah, and honestly, we move further. We use the term democracy now in America almost the same way we use the word, free country. But we keep every step, every election cycle, we move further and further away from it. We don't have approval voting. We don't have ranked choice voting. We hear less and less voices. The Libertarians and Greens are often not invited onto the debate stage. One of the successes we're delighted to have in Utah is that we've fought harder to get our candidates on the debate stage. So we continue to do that. But in the presidential race and in other races, where in Canada or Europe, you're going to hear from all the different political candidates. But in America, we've narrowed it down to this first past the post, two parties. Everyone else is a spoiler. And for everyone that believes that idea that, we have to have just two parties. Okay, let's say that metric actually has to be true, and we cannot do anything to go against having two parties. There's nothing in that metric that says that has to be the Democrat or Republican Party. There's no reason the Libertarians can't be one of those two, even though we reject that whole idea of restricting access to the public forum. We're all about the market responding and people being able to make choices based on what the best product is, the best service, the best representatives. Yeah, exactly. And politics, if nothing else, it's the market of ideas and ideas beyond just where are you going to eat, where are you going to send your kids to school. The idea is what percentage of your economic power should you have control over versus trusting that to the state and trusting it to people all the way over in Washington, D.C. to make the right decision for you and not keep their hands in the cookie jar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just really excited to present that kind of a choice to the voters in Utah that, hey, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, I think we are campaigning and pushing ideas that you are very much worried about and adamant about, and let's work together. And so I invite all Utahns to learn more about my campaign, and as it gets building momentum, to come out and meet us.
Where can people meet? Where can people, apart from your Facebook and Twitter, do you recommend people just send you an email from your Jimmy for Utah website, or what's your recommended way for people to talk to you?
Yeah, I've had a few emails. I've had people reach out to me through the email, through the messaging system on my website here, just down at the bottom. Twitter, Facebook are also great. And I'm very much excited to, visit groups, and if you have an event in your area and you'd like to invite me to come talk and get to know me more and ask me questions, I'm more than happy to go on the record and and talk about my ideas and answer these questions, versus Evan McMullin, who's more than happy to hide behind you know, a website of vague ideas and try to pass them off as something that, you know, 4 years ago, 5-6 years ago, he was completely antithetical to.
Mm.
Yeah.
James, Jimmy, thank you for the time.
Yeah, Knut, it's been awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.
Adios.